Hello, this is Pastor Don Long, and here we are once again with news from the Middle East. There's an article that came out recently in Arutz Sheva titled, "Angry Gazans Try to Storm United Nations Headquarters." Let me read some of it to you. After the UN says it can't pay to repair for Hamas's war because world donors didn't deliver, protests occur in front of the United Nations Relief Organization headquarters, and they turn violent. Hundreds of protesters tried to storm the Gaza headquarters of the UNRWA after they announced that they lacked funds to rebuild the enclave from the damage caused by Hamas's most recent terror war against Israel. Turns out there were about 200 people demonstrating outside the building, burning tires, throwing rocks, and shouting, "We are still homeless." And then it began to turn violent, and Hamas had to send in some police force to break up the demonstration. This occurred about a day after the UNRWA announced that it could no longer afford to repair tens of thousands of homes damaged during the July-August war between Israel and Hamas. Now, question is, what's going on here? And I think when we look at the insanity of the Middle East from 1948 on, it's a question that you have to wonder, when are people going to wake up to what's happening? You see, there are good guys and bad guys. And people say, well, the Israelis are the bad guys. No, I beg to differ with you. Israel has never started a war. It is the Palestinians, it is the Arabs that start war after war after war. It is the Palestinians, it is Hamas, it is Hezbollah that fire rockets at civilian targets. Anybody who steps back and looks at it, it's a very lopsided view of good and evil. But there's a certain mindset that prevails that if we were to take it out of the Middle East and put it right here in Fitchburg, people would say, well, that would be ridiculous. Let me give you the example if we put it into Fitchburg. Let's say there's a neighborhood. I won't name any particular neighborhood in Fitchburg, lest you think I'm picking on you. But let's say there's a neighborhood that has been taken over by gangs of people who want to steal and want to chase the rest of us out of the city. And so out of this neighborhood, periodically, they pour out into the other neighborhoods and they attack us. And in the midst of the attack, Fitchburg mobilizes our police, our SWAT teams, our tactical officers. And so they go into this neighborhood to defeat the thugs, to defeat those who would terrorize the rest of us. And what happens is they're successful. But in the process of having to attack in the neighborhood where the thugs and gangsters and bad guys are all hiding and shooting at the police, well, they shoot back, and sure enough, homes get destroyed in that neighborhood. And suddenly, when it appears that the people in that neighborhood are going to lose, they call out to the government and say, please help us, the big bad police in Fitchburg are beating us up. And so the state police come in, the government comes in and negotiates a peace. And then the people in that neighborhood then turn to the world and say, you need to help us rebuild. We're poor. Those big bad guys in Fitchburg came over and beat us up. Well, that happens once. And then a few years later, that same gang in that neighborhood of Fitchburg comes out and attacks again to destroy the rest of us. Same scenario. We have to go in. We have to deal with it. In the process, more homes are destroyed in that neighborhood. And the people of that neighborhood once again go to the others in the United States and say, please help us. Those big bad guys in Fitchburg came and beat us up. How many times does that have to happen before you realize the problem isn't the big bad guys of Fitchburg? It's the thugs in the neighborhood who keep attacking. And at what point do you come where you deal with that finally? You remove them permanently. And you say, if you start another confrontation and your homes burn down, we are not going to rebuild them. I guess I have a simple mind of peace. I think those responsible nations in the world who have been blessed and prosperous should try to help those in the world less fortunate. But my formula is very simple. No peace, no money. No peace, no money. Palestinians, we will help you if you'll have peace. But if you won't have peace, no money. Now, I saw this work in a little simple way when I was in Haiti with my son Scott, who leads mission trips down there, works with quite a number of schools in the greater Léogâne area. For years he's been there. And one of the things we do when we go down as teams, every team goes down, has a day or two where they distribute food. It's really a thrilling thing to do. It's a very sad thing on another end because so many families in Haiti have barely a subsistence living. So we go in and we have bags of rice and sometimes beans, but usually lots of rice and cooking oil that we're going to give. And the children or the parents show up and they have a ticket. They were given a ticket by either the church or in some way given a ticket. This entitles you to get a handout from the organization. And the day comes and we line up behind tables and some of us are checking tickets, some of us are dispensing the food. You come with your little plastic bag or whatever you have and we scoop in whatever, several pounds of rice, and we give you a container of cooking oil and send you on your way. Well, that was happening in one of the villages there, and a group of bad guys, of thugs, of teenage and young 20-year-old guys who wanted to know why they didn't have tickets, and they had to have a right for tickets, and the team was all lined up to give this food out, and scuffles started to break out from these guys trying to take tickets from people who legitimately had them, creating a ruckus because why couldn't they get them? Let's be clear about that. If you have enough food for 100 people, you can't give it to 1,000. So you have to have some means by which you choose which 100 are going to get it. And so they're beginning to threaten the team that's going to give the food. And Scott simply turns to the team and he says, pack up the food, get back on the bus, and leave. And then he turned to the leaders of the village and he said, we will come back at the point when you, the village, are able to deal with that. When you will ensure that we can show up and safely distribute food, we'll come back and we'll distribute food. That's not Scott's obligation to do it. It's the people of the village. Now, Scott speaks fluent Creole, and he said to the villagers, if you won't deal with the thugs among you, then you, the whole village, don't get the food. Well, that's harsh. No. You're going to put people's lives in jeopardy. And by the way, if you let the thugs rule, then the people who really need the money, who really need the food, aren't going to get it. The thugs get it. Now, simply what he was saying to the village was no peace, no food. No peace, no money. The Palestinian Authority. If you will not stop teaching violence in your schools, the United States will not give you $1 more. If you will not stop the state-sponsored children's education programs that are filled teaching little children to kill the Jews, if you will not stop as a state sponsoring camps where thousands of young children go to camp to learn how to use knives to kill Jews, learn how to use guns to kill Jews, if you will not stop sponsoring that, we will not give you $1 more. And people will say, well, Pastor, what about the poor people? Listen, putting money into a situation where the money's going to fund those who are against peace is not going to help the poor people. We found that in Gaza. For you see, over the years in Gaza, the word from the liberal press was Israel will not let cement come in so people can build their houses. The Israelis were kind of puzzled because they have the logs of the money of the cement that ships from Israel into Gaza. They knew how many tons had crossed the border. The tons should have built thousands of houses. Where are the houses? And so the liberal press says, well, the Israelis won't let them build their houses. Wait a minute. Israel is sending the cement. Well, this past summer we found out where that cement was going. Into building hundreds of miles of underground tunnels so that Hamas could invade Israel, kidnap civilians. That's where the cement went. Where was the world outcry? What on earth, Hamas, are you doing taking the cement from your own people? But no, that's not how it goes. And so what's going in Gaza now? Well, another war was started. And How many rockets have to come into Massachusetts before we would demand that the National Guard find out where they're coming from and destroy those who are sending rockets into our cities? Finally, Israel has to go and deal with that. In the process, as careful as they are, hundreds, if not thousands of homes get damaged or even destroyed. And so the UNRWA says, well, we've got to rebuild. Well, wait a minute, rebuild without peace. You see, I feel for those people who don't have homes. But to rebuild their homes means there's no price that is demanded for their lack of peace. You go to war, and there's no penalty to go to war. You go to war, your house gets bombed or destroyed, but you go to the UN, and they simply say, we'll rebuild for you. That is a no-winner for peace in the Middle East, and anybody who has a sane mind understands that. If you reward those who destroy, you don't get less destruction. You get more destruction. Well, you know, it's the poor people. The poor people are the one who voted Hamas in. And until there's a mass rising up of the populace that says, we do not want a government that takes money meant to help us and build their military machine. We don't want a government that takes food money and buys weapons. Until the populace rises, then all we're doing is encouraging terrorism. The policy of the United Nations, the policy of the United States to put money into the PA or into Hamas is insanity. And, you know, that's what's going on. So what happened? The UNRWA decided in Cairo last October to have an aid conference and to get nations of the world together and say, we got to help these poor Gazans whose homes were destroyed by the bad Israelis. And $5.4 billion was pledged. By the way, how much money did they raise to help the Israelis whose houses had been bombed by rockets? How much money did they help to restore crops that were lost because rockets set fields on fire? None was raised. They don't do that. They're going to raise it for the poor people in Gaza. So $5.4 billion was pledged. Where did that money come from? Well, there were some European Union countries, but there were a lot of Arab countries. And the question is then, how are we in January of 2015 finding out we don't have any money? Well, where is the money? The point is, most of the money has not arrived. $5.4 billion. If you look over the history of Arab countries pledging money to help the Palestinians or the Gazans, when after every war, we're going to raise money to help them, they pledge money they never give. Let me tell you what that's called. It's lying. You say you're going to give money, you don't. Propaganda. Oh, you know, our nation pledged $100 million. Well, where's the news report showing up saying, by the way, of that $100 million you pledged, how much of it actually showed up? You know, nations of the world are so quick to pledge money, but they don't give it. And the Arab nations are notorious for pledging money to the Palestinian cause that they never give. Now, of the money they do give, again, the question is, well, where has that money gone? You see, in the past 12 to 16 months, there have been investigations into the billions, and I'm right, billions of dollars that the European Union nations have poured into the Palestinian Authority, saying, where did the money go? Where did the money go? And there are literally hundreds of millions of dollars unaccounted for. They don't know where it went. Well, we can have some idea. When Arafat was in charge of the PA, he lived in Ramallah and he lived like a freedom fighter and lived like a man who, you know, was sacrificing everything. Meanwhile, his wife lived in Paris in a multi-million-dollar rental place with millions of dollars in Arafat's bank account in Paris. Where did Arafat get millions of dollars? Oh, I wonder if that has anything to do with the millions that are missing from the European. You see, the leaders of Hamas, the leaders of Hezbollah, the leaders of the Palestinian Authority are amazingly wealthy. Where are they getting the money from? Does it have anything to do with millions of dollars being pledged to help people that instead go to fund the military and pay the pockets of the leaders. The money isn't there. Now, the money that has come in was meant to buy cement. And Israel can once again demonstrate, well, cement is being shipped into Gaza. Where is the cement to rebuild the houses? Well, everybody knows exactly what's going on. Hamas is rebuilding the tunnels. How many times does it have to happen? You know, as an American taxpayer, I am very frustrated and angry that our government continues to give money to the Palestinian Authority when the Palestinian Authority's charter calls for the destruction of Israel. By the way, I would not want our money, our tax money, going to any nation whose charter of existence calls for the destruction of another nation. I would be against giving money to Haiti if Haiti had in its charter a line that said, "We are committed to the destruction of the Dominican Republic." I am not going to give my tax dollars to a nation who has embedded in its very reason for existing the destruction of another nation. In fact, the United Nations Charter says that one nation should not be pledging to destroy another nation, and yet that very United Nations wants to accept the PA. You see, there's an insanity that can only be explained at a spiritual level because it's totally illogical in this world that we continue as taxpayers to allow money to be given out of some humanitarian kind of inability, milquetoast kind of way of looking at the world that can't define what's good and evil. We can't define it. And, oh, well, but there's poor people. The money isn't getting to the poor people. The money's going to fund war. Simple suggestion. No peace, no money. Arafat, is gone, but we can say to Abbas, listen, you don't want to have peace? We're not going to fund your police force. By the way, your police force is used against Israelis. It's used to kill people. That, again, is why would I give you money to buy guns for your police when you're preparing those police to attack the nation of Israel? No, you don't get one red cent. And until the American people wake up and realize our tax dollars are funding terrorism, and we demand that Congress give not one more cent to those who support terrorists. I don't care. Well, but we're juggling alliances. Excuse me. We do not fund terrorism. Read my lips. No peace, no money. No peace, no money. Again, people say, well, you're supposed to be a Christian and help people. Well, I am a Christian. And I have a Bible in which the Apostle Paul said to the early church that if a man won't work, he won't eat. Very simple. They had people among the early church who were there and wanted to take advantage of the church for handouts. Paul said they need to be working. And if they won't work, they don't eat. Oh my goodness, that just sounds so unchristian. Well, it might be your definition of Christianity, but it's very biblical. Because you see, if we enforce that, people would work, and then we could pay them. I can pay you for the work you do, and people will come to the church here sometimes, and they want to know if we can give them money. We don't have a fund for that. We have a clothing ministry. Our Father's Table meets here. We feed people several hundred twice a week. We have thousands of articles of clothing go out free every year. But people come and ask for money. We don't have that fund. But once in a while, I've had young men come, and I've said to them, listen, I've got some work that needs to be done, and I'll pay you a wage if you'll come and do the work, and they don't show up. Can't you just give me the money? One time I had work to be done in my house in Hubbardston, and a young man, I said, tell you what, I'll pick you up at 8 o'clock tomorrow. I'll drive from Hubbardston to Fitchburg, pick you up, and bring you out to my house to do yard work, and I'll pay you $10 an hour to do yard work. That's a pretty good, decent fee for a young man to do yard work. I showed up at 8 o'clock. I stayed till about 9:30. He never showed up. I went, did the yard work. He came back and wanted to know if I could give him a handout again. I said, no. But not only that, I'm not going to offer you the work because you don't even show up for it. What do you want, a handout? You don't want to work? Then you don't eat. But you see, when we miss that, what we do is we say, well, that's tough, so we give people money and we just give it and give it and give it, and guess what they want? More. We have a welfare system that's gone extravagant. Where's it getting the money? Takes it from people who have money, who've worked for it, and give it to people who don't have it. Now, I know there's exceptions, but there's a lot of graft and corruption. That's what's going on in Gaza right now. And so the Gazans did not go and protest at Hamas's headquarters. Hamas, where's our money? Hamas, where's our cement? And so here's my question. Why didn't they protest at their own government? Why didn't they go, those 200 people that became a larger crowd afterwards, and smash rocks and burn tires at the headquarters of Hamas for stealing the cement? Because they know one thing about Hamas. If they had shown up and started threatening the headquarters of Hamas, Hamas's militia would have simply stood on the roof and shot them dead. Gathered them in the streets like they do, lined them up against a wall and shot them dead. No trial, no arrest. You were caught doing it, I'm going to shoot you dead. Because Hamas knows that if we do that to 10 or 15 or 20 of them, then that's going to end the riot. And see, the people know, we are not going to go there. They'll shoot us. We're going to go to the UNRWA and protest there because they're not going to shoot us. Reminds me of a story I was told by Ronnie Levy, who's one of our dear friends in Israel. Ronnie said that one summer he was on reserve duty. He's in the IDF, obviously, on reserve duty. And it was his 2 weeks or 3 weeks to be on duty. And he was in Judea and Samaria. And he said, I'm standing guard, sitting on a mountain crop, and I'm looking down in a valley. And below me, he said, there are several dozen Arabs working in the fields. And they know I'm there. He said, they know standing on that ridge there is an armed IDF soldier. They don't even pay attention to me. They go about their business doing their farming. He says, you know why? They know I will not shoot them. They're picking their carrots, their vegetables, their crops, their figs, their grapes, whatever. They're doing their harvest, and they're not even worried. They know Ronnie Levy, the IDF soldier standing there, will not shoot them. He said, now reverse that. All of a sudden, there's a little valley and there's several dozen Israelis working in their crops. And all of a sudden, a Palestinian armed militiaman comes over the rise and stands there. Every one of them is immediately nervous. They're going to appoint someone to keep their eye on him. Why? They know it's highly likely that he's going to lift his rifle and shoot them. You see, again, we've promoted war. We've promoted terrorism with our liberal ideas that somehow if you just give these people what they want, no, you can't give them what they want because what they want is no Jews alive. Who ever heard of anybody agreeing to form a new state where no blacks are allowed? Can you imagine that? What do you think would happen in America if word got out that the Palestinian Authority wants to create a new state called Palestine and no blacks will ever be allowed to live there? Not even allowed to live there. I would hope and I would think that the black community, the African American community in America would rise up and say, that's unacceptable. And yet the Palestinians have made it very clear that a new Palestine has no room for Jews. And yet our liberal thinking, politically correct, let's accept everybody, State Department is in favor of creating a Palestinian state that would be Judenrein. The last state that tried to be Judenrein in such a dramatic way was Hitler's Germany. Let's just get rid of the Jews. Have we learned anything as a society? As Americans, have we stepped up to the moral responsibility of all of living in this world? And so when you look at the history of the Arab nations and how they support, they pledge money they don't give, money gets into the hands of the wrong people, and we continue to think that the answer is that we're going to give money. If we were to take, for example, the last peace talks, it was getting Israel and Palestinian Authority to the negotiation table. What did we as a nation, our State Department and President do? We put all the pressure, John Kerry included, put all the pressure on the Israelis. You got to give concessions. You got to give concessions. Netanyahu said a simple little thing. Wait a minute, we gave concessions. We gave them all of Gaza, pulled out our billions of industry, pulled out at our own expense the Jews who rightfully live there. We, the Israelis, forced the Jews to leave, to give a present of Gaza to the Palestinian people, and they created a terrorist place with Hamas in power. No, don't ask us to give one more concession. Meanwhile, what have the Palestinians been offering for concessions? Nada, zip, zero, nothing. In fact, at the end, when finally people in the world began to wake up, Palestine, you got to do something, they walked away from the negotiating table. You see, I'm puzzled. I don't know if I lived too long in the 50s and 40s when there was still a sense of patriotism, sense of right and wrong, and I've missed the modern world of liberalism and let's accept everything. Accepting terrorism is never going to be an answer. Now, when it comes to the Middle East, I think we're at a point where some Americans are beginning to wake up. They're waking up not because of the Palestinians, not because of the terrorists, not because they've woken up to Hamas or Hezbollah. No, they've woken up to ISIS. If anything has happened in the last 2 years, ISIS has demonstrated how barbaric and brutal radical Islam is. And by the way, Islam radicals, fundamentalists who run ISIS will kill a Muslim as quickly as they'll kill a Christian or they'll kill a Jew. And they'll kill them in the most brutal and barbaric ways. And if they could get their hands or presence into the United States, they will do the same here. And I think people are beginning to wake up some to the fact that there is a brutal ideology in this world. Now, in the last 20 seconds I have, let me suggest to you that it's time to step back and to develop a foreign policy in the Middle East that treats evil as if it's evil and understands how do we confront it. And the people best qualified to do that are the Israelis themselves. This is Pastor Don Long. It's been good to be with you for news from another perspective. I look forward to sharing with you again next week.